Good Thursday to you, everybody in COM 831. Welcome to week boom 8. We are 1 week away from the halfway. Or no, I guess this is the halfway point because 16 weeks, half of 16. But we have a what do they call it, modular week or spring break week or something like that coming up. So cheers. All right, much better. I am here once again. You are now sufficiently caffeinated communication instructor. Let's talk about what we're going to be doing this week, and then we will talk about what we did last week. This week, we're going to be starting a new book as I reach around to reach for the book. Eric Schmidt and Jared Cohen's The New Digital Age. Now, this book has been around for a while, but it's important and still relevant because these guys make all sorts of interesting predictions about what the coming revolution will portend to all of us. And what's interesting now, excuse me, a little bit of allergy thing here, is to compare what it is they said was going to happen with what is actually happening. And in fact, this place sort of the book holds a special place in my heart. Not this book. There are books about which I can say that, but not this one. In that I read this book back in 2013, something like that. And I remember when I read it, I remember when I read it, I had been working a number of years already in humanitarian media. I had a global humanitarian media company, and I was hopping all over the planet, doing work out in some pretty remote places. And I read this a lot. I read a lot of this on a plane and in hotel lounges, airport lounges and hotel lobbies. And I remember reading about the amazing transformative world that these two saw coming. And I was thinking about that in relationship to what I was seeing. And I thought, okay, I'm seeing changes coming, but in terms of sort of, what fundamentally makes people tick, I'm just not seeing what they see. And as you'll read through most of the book, although they cover some of the downsides for this revolution, it's mostly, in their opinion, the revolution is mostly upside. So, for instance, right out of the gate on page 19, they write, as fewer jobs require a physical presence, talented individuals will have more opportunities available to them. Okay, that's great. I don't want to bias you as you read this, okay? But one of the characteristics about how Eric Schmidt and Jared Cohen see the world is they see things like talent as related to things digital. Because there are individuals who are talented with, processes that require on location, human to human interaction that are not talented in a digital space. That's not their thing. And there are those that work in the digital space that are not talented in the human interaction. So the question becomes, for those that are talented in the space, filled human interaction, what becomes of them when key components of those interactions move to a digital space and they're not talented in the digital space? Now, I'm not advocating that businesses and developmental processes in technology and industry, banging the crap out of my keyboard, should be held up or pushed one way or another because some individual can't keep up with the process. Economies and markets change, and that goes for all of you. As we're going to see here this week, I've asked you some questions about AI. Yeah, I mean, now, let me pause on that for a second because there's at least one of you, and I suspect some of you who've been using AI extensively to answer the discussion questions, and you know who you are. Um, Now I'm almost finished with your essays. I've got just a handful that'll be done by the end of this week. Okay. And I again want to reiterate um, the absolute prohibition of the use of AI to generate text. Now, in some ways you can't avoid it because it's now built into the search. So if you're looking for sources, that there's some of the okay, okay, okay. But when it comes to writing the text, you do your own stuff. And I'm I don't want to come off sounding heavy-handed because that's not what we're about here. But I will tell you directly. I, I write a lot. I read a lot, and I can smell AI from clear across the room. And if I even suspect that that it might be late. I might be doubting my own judgment. Maybe I'm tired. This happens. I'm human like everybody else. So if I even suspect that there's AI generation, I have a number. I mean, I use AI for research. Okay, I'm very familiar with a number of AI applications, and I have a number that I use to check texts. And if I get a score that's in the 90s by way of AI detection, the producer of that text gets a 0. Okay. And again, I don't want sort of a vibe here for this class, but I cannot emphasize the importance emphasize enough the importance for you to avoid skills atrophy. Work on your skills. Work on your skills. Okay. So, I'm not suggesting that an industrial process, be held up because it displaces somebody. And in this week's questions, I'm going to be asking you to start looking very carefully at what AI is doing and will continue to do to disrupt the business that you're in. Communication, and in particular, strategic communication and corporate communication and advertising and all of these things. These segments, these layers of the industry are being impacted, and there are jobs being displaced. So it goes with economies. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I mean, if you're, and I don't, and this applies to me, by the way. And so I don't mean to sound indifferent or, like, oh, tough luck for you. But it doesn't matter how talented we are in what we do. Part of being talented means our ability to adapt and adjust and then shift how it is what we do, and with the tools that we have in accordance with the direction that the market is going. So you could be a tremendously talented blacksmith, okay, let's say, and you're really good at making horseshoes. You take a piece of straight steel and you bang it and you bend it and you shape it and you put holes into it, and it goes on the bottom of the hoof of a horse. And you're really good at that. And you can crank out those horseshoes and all day long as you stand over your anvil and forge, hot coals that heat the steel and the anvil on which you pound it, bing, 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 with your hammer. It's hot in there. Okay. So you have the door open to your shop. And all day long as you bang out horseshoes, you see Model T and Model A cars go puttering by your shop. Yo, dude, you have better figure out something else to do with that hammer, because horses ain't gonna be the transportation mode of the future. And unless you want to get displaced and be out of a job, they go, but I'm really good at working with horses. And it's like, yeah, man, but we're not moving things around with horses anymore. It's all about cars. You have to adjust. Okay. So props to that for, Schmidt and Cohen to say, hey, things change, and these are disruptors. So even though the book is a wee old, those are things that you can take away. Start thinking ahead about the disruptions by way of technology that you're going to encounter in your field, and get trained and get ready to adjust accordingly. I think I heard it said once, I can't remember whom, but the the expression was AI won't replace humans in the human workers in the future. Workers who know how to work with AI will displace other workers. And yes, there's going to be a contraction in the markets that you want to work in. That is, there'll be fewer jobs, because one of the, it's not just AI, one of the significant hallmarks of the technologies that we're applying now is, dramatic reduction in the need for multiple people to do a process. I mean, that's typically the case in technology. All right, technological advances tend to displace people. So for instance, if you had to have a whole room full of folks copying out texts in order to reproduce a book, and then you got a printing press in which you took letters that were in blocks and you arranged them on a board, and then you rolled them with ink, and you put a piece of paper underneath, and you turned a handle that pushed the block down into the page, and then you picked it up and pulled the page off half. Okay, so you don't need 50 guys with quill pens copying the text. You've got one machine that will produce the work of 50. It would take 50 a month. You produce that in an afternoon. Okay, technology tends to shrink the demand for labor in a market. But what technology does is open doors for those who understand how to use it. So yeah, come to an understanding of this technology that is AI, use it accordingly, but for the skills training purposes that you're after in this and other classes, don't use it to do your writing for you. Okay? All right. Enough said. So I hope you're going to enjoy Schmidt and Cohen. Okay, I'll be interested to see what you have to say. Okay, let's take a look at last week. You know what? Actually, before we do that, let's just take a really quick look at what we have coming up. So next week, that is, the week of the 20s to next week is the 20th. The week after that is modular week. All right, so we will not have actually, yeah, no. So coming up week 9, we will not have we do not have class. Did I get that right? Yeah, modular week is coming up. So on the other side of that, though, November 3rd, okay, your technology tool is due. Okay. All right. So yeah, so you have week 8, and that's the week that you're working on right now. Okay. And then you have week 9. I did get that right. You have week 9, which is modular week, and so we won't have class. Are you gonna get reading for that? Yeah, okay, maybe. But I'm not gonna give you stuff to do. Okay. All right, let's take a look at what you had to say concerning the discussion questions from last week, week 7. All right, as we finished up Weekonomics. Okay, question number 1: can bloggers exert pressure on despotic rulers to bring about more freedom and openness? I wanted you to support your answer with something. Okay. It's interesting. I found it interesting how many of you answered this. Most of you said, yeah, I think that they can. Okay, so Sarah, you went last. Let's take a look. She said, I believe bloggers can, under the right circumstances, help push towards more openness, though it rarely enough on its own. Bloggers can expose abuse, connect people to shared grievances, amplify dissenting voices that the state media would suppress. And then, Brianna, you had something similar to say. Yes, I believe bloggers can exert pressure on their leaders. Careful with our prepositions. In order to protest for rules and law changes within a nation. Okay. Yeah, okay. I mean, and most of you were in accords with that. That was your agreement. I'm gonna suggest a slightly different take. Okay, now, if I asked you this on an exam, wink, and I just said, in what's your opinion? And you said, yeah, sure. I would ask you to support your opinion, which means, or I might say in your considered opinion, which means, give me some sort of evidence that you're aware of, that you've internalized, you memorize this stuff. Okay. Here's one of the interesting things that we have found by way of blogger influence. Bloggers have influence in state systems that have allowances for influence. State systems that don't have allowances for influence, like despotic places like China is a good example. Bloggers don't have, significant influence. Why? Because the tools and technologies by which bloggers blog are equally and often more aggressively used by the state that opposes the blogging. So in China, for instance, the state has a very sophisticated, state-sponsored and much better funded than any blogger or blogging group network of individuals that monitor blogs, that monitor IP addresses, that trace where things come from. They have what's called a social score system in China, in which if you're found out or caught out or even identified in association with those who are saying things that are critical of the government, this lowers your social score, and that prohibits you from getting jobs, from getting on public transportation, from leaving the country. It may even bring you into conflicts with the state in which you'll be tried. You go to prison. These sorts of things. The ease of expression through technology is also used by the state. I mean, the state in despotic areas is not like, oh, what's this? How do we use it? No, they're despots and despotic states maintain their power because they understand how to wield power. They're not these dumb, cliche, cartoonish portrayals that you often see of a heavy-handed state. They don't last as heavy-handed states if they don't understand how to seize hold of and manipulate the levers of power. It's in systems like the United States that have safeguards and even allowances built in for criticism of the state that bloggers flourish. And then that raises the question, if you have a system in which you have mechanisms built in and tolerance of criticism of the state, what is it that ultimately reforms the state? Is it the blogger that reforms the state, or is it the structure, the build of the state that allows it to tolerate criticism? Do you understand? So you can't say, well, look, this criticism changed the state. Well, no, maybe the state changed because the state is designed to change through allowance of criticism from a whole bunch of places. So I'm cautious about this idea, and in part, I want you to be cautious of the notion that because something is newer by way of technological application, it is therefore better or more effective in doing XYZ. There are instances in which that's not true. Okay. Social media demonstrably, and I've done a lot of research in this area, is demonstrably not better at establishing and maintaining long-term emotionally and intellectually satisfying human connections. It's just, it doesn't matter how many thumbs up and likes and something that a post gets. It's just not as good. Okay, so be cautious of simply saying, don't be a hopeless techophile, that because it's technological and it's new, it must be better. Not necessarily the case. Okay. You know what? And I'm sorry. I just understand that was question 2, not question 1. I jumped ahead one. Okay, my bad. Okay, let's go back then to question 1. Okay. Question number 1 from last week. What is Kiva? Given the scale of poverty worldwide, can initiatives like it solve the global problem of access to capital? Okay, let's take you, Sarah. You're right here at the top. Kiva is an online platform that lets people lend small amounts of money to entrepreneurs and families around the world. This is a great example of it happens collaboration. It shows how people can use technology to come together and make a real difference, just even with $25. While I think Kiva helps individuals, communities by providing access to capital, I don't think it can fully solve global poverty on its own. I believe real lasting change also requires education, infrastructure, fair government systems. Still, I love platforms. Okay, and many of you took the same tack. I'm looking for another book here. For those of you interested, and that if you had me in the summer, you heard this spiel already, but I'm going to give it to the rest of you. If you're interested in the not-for-profit space and efficacy therein, I cannot recommend this book enough. When Helping Hurts: How to Alleviate Poverty Without Helping the Poor, and the authors are Kobit and Fickert. All right. And they make a salient observation, one that I have come to a deep understanding of, having worked in poverty relief for many, many years. Having processes like Kiva are certainly, it's better than not, but it is at its heart. I have to be careful about how I say this. The central problem is not access to capital. Access to capital is a symptom of larger problems. My experience has been in working having worked over 27 countries for almost 20 years in the not-for-profit space, that when you find something, when you find a place in which there is a lack of access to capital, that's a symptom of a larger problem. Typically, it is a symptom of a status state. Okay, let me say that again. It is a symptom of a statist state. What is a statist state? A statist state is a country in which the state has seized control of most of the processes of the economic sector. It controls the businesses, it controls the banks, it controls the activity of people through price fixing and disproportional taxation. And by the way, our country is not just, does not, I mean, if it suffers from disproportional taxation, it suffers from disproportional taxation in an upward direction. Just look at the numbers, okay? It's like 1 or 2% of earners in the United States pay something on the order of 60 to 70% of federal income tax. So it wears me out, man. I mean, it does. It makes me exhausted to keep hearing politicians go on, Bernie Sanders. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Oh, the rich are going to pay their fair share. Yeah, dude. The rich pay their fair share. Okay, they pay most of the federal taxes, and there's no line above which where you become exempt for taxes. There is a line below which you are exempt from federal tax. It doesn't work in the other way. All right, so there's my complaint about our system. But a statist system is one in which the state controls these things. Okay, so what are the effects? Well, the effect, a lack of capital because it's controlled by the state, that is an effect, but that is a symptom of a larger effect. The larger effect is in the minds of the individuals, the desire, the willingness to take a chance, the motivation to even get up and do something um, by way of entrepreneurial exercise, that is, open up some sort of a small business, is very, very low. Why? Because they have been conditioned through the application of heavy-handed state policies that if you start something, the state is going to seize control of it, that is, take it away from you, or is going to tax you so heavily or restrict what prices you can set on something or how much you get from something, that it's like, why do I, what, as they say in business, the juice is not worth the squeeze. It's like, why do I bother? That, more than anything, dampens, depresses, eliminates entrepreneurial activity. And so Kiva, in these kinds of things, I want to say something that perhaps might sound controversial to you. I think the benefit of Kiva is mostly to the people that put the money in it, because then they feel like they've done something good. We're not going to straighten out poverty, regionally, nationally, or globally, 20 to 50 bucks at a time by buying people, one or two sewing machines. That's poverty is solved with application of scale through large movements in markets and industrialization. And micro lending will not bring about industrialization. The removal of despotic and statist state programs and policies will. So, can it make a difference? It depends on who you're asking about the differences made for. Okay, just some perspective. And I'm not a cynical guy. All right, I'm not saying, no, I don't give any money to these. I'm not the old man that's yelling at the world to get off his lawn. I'm just, giving you my experience. Question number 3. Of the 6 ground rules for reinvention listed by Tapscott and Williams, which 3, in your opinion, are most likely to bring about a world as envisioned in macroeconomics? Now, by the way, so wink, wink, you should understand what these are because they may appear on a test. And then also, these are things you should pay attention to. All right. Do you understand, say, culture of collaboration? Are you becoming a part of the vanguard? Are you up to date as the net generation? And I don't mean you're on your phone all the time. That's not what that means. Are you part of the net generation? That is, do you understand beyond the user side of technology how this stuff works and what's it for? I mean, I'm going to ask you straight up. Do any of you know anything about coding, even in the most rudimentary way? I don't mean you're going to become, you're going to become coders. You're going to sit there all day with a diet soda and a bag of chips. That's not what I'm talking about. But do you understand the process? And if the answer is no, then get on it. Okay. So, a number of you picked different ones. Kenesha, you picked create a culture of collaboration. Collaborative culture is foundation of the vision mentioned in Weeconomics. Tapscott and Williams emphasized the future belongs to organisms. Sorry, you wrote it wrong. I read it. You wrote it right. I read it wrong. Organizations and societies that harness collective intelligence rather than relying on centralized control. Okay, and then I'm going to come back to that because you touch on an important point there. Find and strengthening the vanguard, investing in the net generation, and the net generation needs to invest in itself. Here's one of the interesting things by way of collaboration that I'm seeing, within a sort of in a social trend. I sort of watch. I don't want to say monitor because that sounds kind of creeper stuff. I watch content and look at discussions about and analysis of online content posting and creation because I'm interested in media effects. Here's one of the trends that I'm noticing. As more gets shared, the filters for sharing go down. That is people aren't, they're staring at their phone. And amazingly to me, they're not thinking, oh, hey, the whole the whole planet is watching once I push send on this. And actually, a good portion of the planet is watching even before you push send, because every time you touch a keyboard, there's something that's recording it, whether it's your local IP, your local internet provider, or the IP address that it's attached to your cell phone company. Doesn't matter. But anyway, but they seem to forget that as soon as I push send, the whole globe is looking at me, which they are. So as the sharing goes up, the filters for sharing go down. People post things, and we're only talking about, maybe in terms of this what's driving this. We're not talking about majority. We're talking about maybe single or low double digit percentages. The filters go down. The reaction to the post goes up, both positive and negative, like someone said something mean about Charlie Kirk on X and now they're fired. And the willingness to identify what you said with who you are goes down. That is, as the I'm posting out there to the group goes up, the movement towards anonymity goes up. And anonymity is the enemy of collaboration. That's a topic that I think needs a lot of exploration. Is the online culture that we're now developing driving us into these little isolated groups, and within the groups driving us to these isolated identities that we put forward with the intent of disguising who it is we are behind them? Fake names, fake avatar, generated names, generated, I guess fake because they're as real as any representation of something is, which is not. But anyway, generated avatars, generated names with the purpose of providing anonymity. And collaboration and anonymity don't go together. So I'm not sure. I am not sure, again, that I agree that this technology, these tools, are moving us towards collaboration. I think that there are powerful consequences that are coming from our use that are driving in exactly the opposite direction. All right, question number 4. In your opinion, is there a dark side to macroeconomics? And all of you, overwhelmingly said yes, you believe so. I mean, Cynthia, you said, well, you don't think it's intentional. Okay. And that's fair enough. I mean, there's always downsides. There's always winners and losers when there's change. Always, always, always. If you're looking for change in which it's all win, 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 you're go look in a place, that doesn't exist. You're searching for a utopia, which is Greek for a place that doesn't exist. All right, Amber, you sort of, this sort of sums up the zeitgeist of the answer to this post. There's definitely a dark side of macroeconomics, especially in our digital world. Collaboration, openness, and sharing can be misused. Sensitive information can be hacked. Harmful content can be spread quickly, and networks run the risk of monopolies. While these ideas are inspiring, they can also be exploited. Okay, I'm not sure what you mean by these ideas. Now, remember when you're writing and you're referring to something back, if it's not in the previous sentence, you say these. That's we're like right over here. Okay. All right, but that's sort of where everybody is at in terms of this answer. Okay. All right. So keep working on those tools, those technology tools. I will have finished with your essays by the end of this week. If you have a note on there to contact me, please contact me. But there have been some of you who have, so ask them. Is Dr. Gardner, a mean, rough guy? No, I'm not. I am here to help you, not here to harass you. Okay, so get back to me because I'm here to help. All right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of the week. Okay. Remember that I think about you, I pray about you often, and I will see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.